To look at some of the features of the RF Custom Toolbox, I'm here on the website looking at some of the features listed, and we've got organize and deploy your favorite tools, families, Revit commands, folder or web links, etc. in a dockable and customizable toolbox. Find tools and assets quickly through the search function. Organize family buttons with pull downs, grouped panels, and tabs, which you can color code and customize. Toggle custom temporary view templates on and off, etc. There's a number of other features listed here. If you haven't downloaded yet, go ahead and download that on the download page so that you can start testing out and customizing your own Revit. And it looks like posts about this tool have already started popping up on Reddit and other platforms. One user says, "Wow, for years I've been begging for a Revit Tool Palette similar to AutoCAD's, and it's finally here. I could cry." I've got no problems with happy tears, so let them flow. In this video, we're going to cover 4 main topics to show you what the tool can do and answer questions you may have. First, the toolbox purpose and overview, then toolbox customizability and deployment, and features and capabilities, and then last, integrating your own or third-party tools. So in Revit, the first thing you'll notice is that there's a toolbox that gets docked to the side, which you can turn on or off by clicking on the button on the RF Tools tab of Revit. Now this is a dockable toolbox, which means that you can pull it off, you can put it on another screen, you can dock it up to the top and have it relay out the buttons for you. You can also, if you wish, dock it directly on top of some of the built-in Revit toolboxes. I'll just keep it over here at the side for the time being. This tool is fully customizable, so you get to choose some or all of the ways you want to use this tool. For example, some users want to create organized tabs of their favorite families and easily search for them. Even if you have a large content management library, there are always those core families that your teams use over and over again that they may want fast access to. Some want to organize reference and learning material like links to Revit standards, your training videos, your SharePoint sites, design guides, or tips and tricks. This could be internal ticketing systems or network resources, etc. The list goes on. And some users want to increase their efficiency by putting existing tools exactly where they want them, like Revit built-in tools, or their favorite Rushforth tools, or even your own or third-party tools. For those advanced users that want to integrate your own custom tools, we'll show you how to do that in just a couple minutes. And there are examples of each of these use cases in the provided example toolbox. This example toolbox you see here comes with the tool, but you can choose to use as little or as much of it as a starting point for your own custom toolbox. To customize the toolbox, just click the Customize option and edit anything you want. These edits can happen through this interface, or you can do all the same things directly in Windows Explorer. So every tab, panel, pull down, and button gets its own folder in Explorer, which gives you additional control over editing, copying, and sharing toolboxes and automations with others. At the top of the customizable options, you have 2 folder locations. This allows you to show multiple toolboxes from 2 different sources. As an example, perhaps you would like to host a primary toolbox on SharePoint with limited write access, while allowing users to create their own custom toolbox for themselves or for sharing with specific teams. To share a toolbox with others, just place the toolbox folder in a shared location and have your users point their path to that shared location. This path is saved in each user's rfsettings.ini file, so you could choose to deploy that as well. As an important note, if you are using a cloud-hosted shared location, just make sure that you point the path to the local synced folder and not the web address. For example, with SharePoint, you can choose to sync the folder, and that will show up as a local OneDrive folder, and you can point the tool to that path. So as an example custom toolbox, I created a minifigures folder and changed the colors and button settings to be a little more customized. Here I can put my favorite tools, my favorite families, in my own tabs so that the toolbox can be as custom as the way that I work. And just note that only the primary folder controls the branding logo at the bottom, so putting this one as primary will set that as well. So if you were starting from scratch and wanted to create a new toolbox, you can just type in a new folder location in the folder 2 box. Or you can just click the Add Tab button and specify that you want to create a second folder. You can, of course, continue adding on to folder 1 as well. So let's just type our new folder name here. The required fields are in red. The folder names for any of the tabs, panels, and buttons don't have any naming requirements, but it does read them in alphabetical order, so the name affects the order that they show up in the toolbox. And you can change that at any time. So I'm going to create my David's Favorites tab, and the background color, anytime you have these color options, you can use either the hex codes for colors or any of the Microsoft Windows standard color names, both of which you can search for online if needed. And then I'll just click to create, which shows up my new tab. And jumping back over to Windows Explorer, you can see that it created a folder for the new tab. When a folder is created, it will also create a settings text file, which contains the settings you selected. This file name can also be changed if needed, but it does need to end in settings.txt to be recognized as a settings file. So going back to the example folders, we can see that the organization is basically Toolbox, then Tab, then Panel, then Buttons or pull-down buttons, and then the buttons under a pull-down. And while you can edit anything in the toolbox in Revit, it can also be faster to move and organize things directly in Windows Explorer. For example, if I wanted to move these buttons to now be under a pull down, I can just drag them in. Clean up some things here. Or if I want the settings panel to be on a different tab, I can just drag it onto another tab. Let me reset the path to the original path in the tool, and you can see that the pull down has changed and the settings panel is now on the More Tools tab. So anytime you make a change in Windows Explorer, you can just click on the refresh button to see those changes reflected back in the tool. So what if I just accidentally deleted the example toolbox, or I messed it up enough that I want to get it back? I can just rename the folder in Windows Explorer, and then the toolbar will see that it's missing and it will recreate it so that you can get back the original example folders. And in Windows Explorer, I could also zip up my folder to a file so that I could share my custom toolbox with clients or with others outside of my office. There are multiple types of actions you can assign to a button, so let's look at each one. If I click Customize, then click to add a button, you can see the settings that can be saved to a button. A lot of the settings are optional, with the required settings in red. Just as before, any of these settings can be edited here in Revit or directly in a text file in Windows Explorer. The first type of action is RF Tool, which allows you to select from the list of tools to assign. Example buttons for each of these are already included in the example toolbox. Then we have Load Family Type. This allows you to specify an RFA family file and a type to load and insert into your project. When you select or type a path, you get the option to copy the family to the toolbox folder. That could be good if you want to make the toolbox folder self-contained without relying on external links. But if you're inserting families from a shared library, you may want to link to the original path so that you're always linked to the most updated version. For the images and icons, I do recommend keeping the setting to copy to the toolbox, as it will improve performance when loading. So I did get asked, what if a family has no types, but it's a required field? This should be rare, but you would just paste the family name here, since Revit auto-creates a type with the family name when inserted into a project if there are no types. Another great question is, can I bulk add families? There are a couple options here. Since everything is done with simple text files, you can easily create hundreds of buttons at a time from an Excel list. Here's an example Excel file that has code that will create lots of family buttons from your long list and put them on the tabs, panels, and pull downs listed in the table. Now don't worry about having to retype this code. You can just download the file here and modify it however you want. If you prefer to work in Windows Explorer, you can just create one button and then copy and paste a lot in Explorer, and then you would have to edit each text file or edit in the Toolbox editor. The next action type is MEP system type. This is just like inserting a family, except this time these are built-in system families that are a little bit different. One cool thing is the ability to preset system types and materials to save steps every time you need to model duct or pipe. And then we have Apply Temp View Template. Just type in the name of the view template that you want to toggle on and off as a temporary view template in your current view. This is super useful for toggling on and off color settings or filters or coordination view templates while working without affecting how views will print. And then we have Link. The cool thing about Link is that you can use both network paths and web links to create shortcuts to whatever you want to keep handy. As we mentioned some of those examples before of what those could be. Run CS code. This will run C# code that you have set up in the Run C# code tool. In the Run C# code tool, you can just save out your C# to a .cs file and then specify the location here. For this option, you do need to follow the class naming conventions that the Run C# tool uses. Just as a quick sample, let me show you one of the useful examples included. On the More Tools tab, we have an example that shows you how you can quickly create a button to start a built-in Revit command. If I go to the folder for this button, I can see the CS file that gets run. I'll open it in Notepad just to see the code. So this line here is really the only line that really does anything. And if we wanted to have this button open up the Revit options menu, I would literally just need to paste this word to the end of this line of code and hit save. And just for fun, let's click the button to see if it works. So easy as that, no having to worry about compiling, deploying, or anything else. Just edit the code. So going back to the code, down below in this example file is a full list of the built-in Revit commands that you can choose from and create buttons for whatever command you would like. Now in the Run C# tool, there are other examples that you can modify to run all sorts of automations on your Revit model. Also remember that you can also schedule C# code to run in models at scheduled times using the RF Automator tool. You also have the option in the C# tool to compile your code to a DLL file, which can be deployed to others as well. Now going back to the button options for a new button, the last option for event type is Execute DLL. This option not only allows you to run DLLs that you created in the Run C# tool, but you can run any other DLL that you've created or that anyone else has created by specifying the class and the function names to run, which we'll cover in more detail in this next section. Maybe you already have some custom ribbons in Revit, but you're running out of space in the Revit interface. Or maybe you find it time-consuming to get your custom ribbons changed, recompiled, and deployed to all of your teams. Or maybe you want to have the convenience of always having your tools and shortcuts visible when working. And you're excited about the new innovation your team can do with these new capabilities. Let's look at how to get both old tools and new tools into the toolbox. So we'll start with new tools. Going back to the Revit C# tool examples, this is just one of the ways that your users can experiment, test, and instantly deploy new tools. The examples in the Run C# tool are easily customizable, so you can quickly automate tasks for your specific workflows. Just an example, I can modify this example to select all elements above 10 feet, then export this as a DLL file. So I'll just find here in the code where it's currently finding 1 foot and change it to 10, and then I will hit compile to DLL. And then I'll add a new button, and I'll just quickly fill out some of these things. And then click to create it, and let's go ahead and click it to see if it's working. And it looks like it's working. So I now have a custom tool that I could share with others just by sharing my toolbox location with them. Now, if you have a more complex tool that requires references to other assemblies or a complex user interface, you'll likely want to compile your tool in a development environment like Microsoft Visual Studio, where you're going to have more debugging and development tools. When you're compiling your DLL, you do not have to use the example class and function names. In your button settings, you can just type in your class name and function names that you want to use. If you're compiling your tool in Visual Studio and you use a different namespace, the namespace just goes before the class name with a period, just like you would call it in code. You can see below the fields some example code showing you how your class definition may look. And unclicking these argument options will show you how that affects what your definition may look like. Which brings us to the important discussion of how to make existing or third-party tools compatible. One detail to point out is that if you look at the expected inputs or arguments for the function, you can call a function with options to include a string and or a Revit UI application or nothing. This is slightly different than what Revit requires for a function being called from a ribbon button. If you have an existing external command called from a ribbon button, it will look like this with arguments for external command data, a string, and an element set. The first thing a tool usually does is get access to the UI application, which then gets you access to the current document, your selection, and the Revit database, which can look something like this. The RF Custom Toolbox already provides the function with the UI application, so you can skip that declaration. So if you want your code to be compatible with both the Revit ribbon and the custom toolbox, simply add a second function definition that accepts the UI application directly, and the rest of the code can remain the same. If your application has code that follows the variable declarations, you can avoid having to copy and paste a duplicate copy of the code by just moving the code to a function that both functions can call, kind of like this, that I've called run next tasks. So all you'd have to do is add that compatible function declaration and then just recompile the DLL and you're done. This does mean that to make your tool compatible with the custom toolbox, you do need access to the code to recompile it with this additional function declaration. So if you have a favorite third-party application that you want to have compatible with the toolbox, just ask the developer of the add-in to add a compatible function declaration to their updated versions. And maybe send them a link to this video as well. So now with your compatible custom tools, you can now edit your own custom toolbox to look and behave however you want it to. And now that it's also so easy to share your toolbox with others, we can help all Revit users be more productive than ever. So make sure you spread the word and share this video with all of your clients and fellow Revit users so that they can find the same relief that you have.
No matter what your role or discipline, these are time-saving tools that no Revit user should have to work without. Visit the website to find out more about how these and other tools can save you time by automating your workflows.